بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. Your Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends, entrepreneurs, youth, a very good morning to you, and a very special thank you to Pepsi for their very gracious invitation, and to my dear friend Dina Sharif for not consulting with me on the title of my 10-minute intervention. But I think the initial introductions and the remarks by the previous speakers set the right stage perhaps for a few thoughts of my own. By way of just stating the obvious and reaffirming what we all should take a lot of pride in and be extremely happy about, those of us especially of a certain age who have witnessed development in the region over the years. I think relative to just 10 years ago, when I attended the first event in the region on entrepreneurship, we have come a long way. It is no small accomplishment. Credit is to many of you in the room, to many of the older guys that had been alluded to, who fought, I would argue at the time, a lot of odds, a lot of skepticism, a lot of ridicule in some cases, and difficulty in mobilizing resources to just get us started. The fact that we're meeting here today, and that in fact not a month goes by without some event on entrepreneurship, some entrepreneurship competition, some news announcement about a launch of an entrepreneurship project is taking place, is in itself, I think, cause for celebration and cause for congratulation to everyone that has made this possible. But I think in 2016, with all that we have seen around us, both locally, regionally, and abroad, a reality check is in order, if only to recognize the larger context for which our discussion takes place. The context that is changing, not only locally and regionally, but also globally at large. And I think some of this is becoming clearer in light of recent events, sort of the changing global context that will affect all of us, that affects this region, and I think will affect the entrepreneurs and everyone that is out there helping them. I think the best illustration of the changing global context is the recent US election outcome. Many of you have probably not recovered yet from the realization that it happened. But the fact that the election did produce the outcome we observed tells us a lot about the context in which many of these conversations and changes is taking place. I think we've discovered now, more clearly than in any previous time perhaps, that fear and anger matter. We've discovered yet again that inequality and what it breeds in terms of lack of opportunity, disenfranchisement, disillusionment matters. We've discovered that trust in government and public institutions matters a lot for how the public views, sees, perceives, and acts. And we've discovered that social and political polarization wreak havoc when they come together in an atmosphere of fear and anxiety about the future. We discovered also, sadly, that millennials, however many they are, and however mobilized they can be, cannot alone bring about the desired outcomes. That was true in the US, and that was true in Brexit just a few months prior. And I suspect a lot of this is going to happen in the coming period. A lot of more surprises. In Italy, in the Netherlands, in France, A common thread amongst all of this, clearly, is populism, driven by anxiety, anger, fear about globalization, economic uncertainty, impacts of mass migration and refugees. All of this is creating a new global context that will affect everything we do and everything we plan and everything we pursue in the coming period. There's also a regional context that one can speak about now a bit more comfortably in light of what has happened outside in the world. After all, we don't seem as crazy or out of control as we thought we were. We're a bit more normal in light of the election outcome in the US and the election outcome in Brexit. Social polarization breeds conflict. Political polarization and violence breed extremism. Violence, uncertainty, lack of social cohesion, sectarianism, tribalism, these are maybe different shades of the larger problem that we all face. And a problem that is at the core of economic transformation, globalization, social protection, political participation, issues that continue to confront our region and have created a level of uncertainty and a level of conflict and violence that is unprecedented for over 100 years. Look at any number, any set of indicators, and you will have to confront the reality that 5 years post the 2011 events, instead of creating a transition from pre-2011 towards prosperity, stability, political participation, we are now fighting for our existence as societies. But before we feel complacent, or we think we're just part of the same problems around the world, we have some specific issues we cannot ignore, some of which have been alluded to by the previous speakers. So keep the conflict and the violence and the anxiety and the fear for a moment. We're in the middle of a regional economic recession. There's no hiding this. This is the biggest economic recession in 3 decades. And I can say this because I was close to the age of many people in this room when the last economic recession took place. There are many manifestations of this that are clear and that affect what you want to do. Any discussion about sustainability or entrepreneurship has to be cognizant of the economic context in which all of our discussions take place. And it's not just about growth and the rates of job creation, which are obvious. It's about things that many of you are also seeing right now. We are in the middle of a massive liquidity squeeze. Our banks are in good shape, but they are unable to deliver, respond. Our private sector is feeling the cutbacks in public sector spending. Almost more than a third of our countries are on some sort of an IMF program. In fact, if you were to add the countries in conflict, the Libyas, the Yemens, the Syrias, you probably over 50% of our countries are on some sort of an IMF program. And the last time I checked, IMF programs are not about anything other than austerity, cutbacks, retrenchment, rationalization, putting immense pressure on the private sector, but especially on everyone in this room. This is not to mention the other trends that could potentially emerge as the world at large realigns in response to changes in the UK, changes in Europe, changes in the US, and the inescapable fact that the violence taking place in our region, whether in the name of sectarianism or in the name of extremism, is part and parcel of every global effort to bring about peace and prosperity, and hence massive intervention, massive resources devoted to dealing with the violence. This, in my humble opinion, and maybe this is the only one small reason why I feel a bit more happy to not be in my 20s right now. These trends, phenomena, changes, what has happened and what is likely to happen will place immense burdens on the entrepreneurs of today and in the future. You are not only fighting difficult economic circumstances, you will be asked, expected to be relevant socially, to be part of the solution for whatever our region does to find a way out of the mess we've gotten ourselves into. Your projects will have to be socially responsible. Your projects will have to tackle basic things that we can no longer do in the region. Health, education, nutrition, just to name a few. Your projects will have to be predicated on the assumption that you have to fight for the capital you will raise and the private sector leaders who will work with you. You will have to become not just agents of entrepreneurship, but agents of, in fact, policy reform. What is it that you need to make your business viable, to make your proposition be viable on the ground? You will have to identify those public sector champions who can work with you on identifying the open spaces, creating the right modalities for change. Those are some of the lessons we are now drawing from the previous 15 years in the region of looking at public sector reforms. Most of the reform projects that can be deemed a success were in fact led by individuals in ministries or government organizations or private sector associations, individuals who were committed, persistent, visionary, who fought and ultimately were fired because they did the right thing. So the entrepreneurs of the Arab world increasingly have to be not only good business managers, good project designers, they have to be agents of social change, agents of peace, agents of tolerance, and agents of the kind of prosperity that we all, and stability that we all want to have in the region. So I think, yes, there are a lot of amwaj of hope that we want to create. But we have to get past the amwaj of fear and turbulence that will pull us back, that will restrain our ability to do what we need. I think it's that focus on what is required now and where we ultimately want to go that would give us the best chance of, inshallah, accomplishing for ourselves and our society what we all deserve. Thank you very much.